Hi guys, just before we start the episode today, whatever platform you are listening to this on, whether it be on the podcast, Apple Podcast, YouTube, whatever it is, please support it. Please like, subscribe, whatever you can do. Want to reach as many people as possible. So please do that and we'll get right into the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback Podcast. Today, I am really excited to have on the show Christina Kantzavelos.
Great job.
Yeah, cool. I think the audience now is used to me butchering pronunciation, so that was one of the more difficult ones. So just to give you a bit of an introduction before we get into Christina's story and her telling us and going through that, Christina has battled with food sensitivities, migraines, and various autoimmune diseases for decades, including POTS, celiac disease, Lyme disease, co-infections, and mold toxicity. However, after experiencing illness for so long, being couch and housebound and sensitive to just about everything, she's now back in the world, hiking, traveling, which we were just talking about before we started recording, and tolerating most foods and scents. Although she's still very much on the road to healing, she's made a conscious decision to choose an attitude and intention of thriving over an obsession with surviving, and hopes to share that with others. And this is what I love, because I think I've had to go through the same kind of thing. I'm still fully believing in where I'm going to be, and then my health is going to be better than ever one day, but I'm not willing to wait around until that point where I can, where that will be, that I can start living my life. And it sounds like that's what the journey you're on.
Amen. Yeah. 100%. That's exactly where I am. We have to choose life over and over again, especially when we have chronic illness. Otherwise, what's the alternative? You know, I lived it for a while and it sucked.
Definitely.
It's hard.
Yeah, well, we'll go back into that if that's okay. So if you could take us back to before the beginning of when you start to get health issues, or you know, it might have been going on, you know, for your entire life, I'm not sure. Could you just tell us a little bit how your childhood was from a health perspective? Did you ever have any health issues? Were you healthy? And then maybe take us through that first part of the story.
Yeah, so it all started in my mother's womb, but I'm sure to some degree.
Yeah. Maybe in her mother's womb.
Exactly. You know, they say trauma sticks around for 14 generations.
Yeah.
14. So that's a lot. And with that, healing can also stick around for 14 generations. We can switch that narrative. So as a child, I had a lot of gut issues. We didn't know where they came from. It was just essentially like IBS. I remember feeling nauseous all of the time. In retrospect, it was likely celiac disease, but it wasn't. People didn't know, people still don't know that much about it, but especially not then. That was a long time ago. And then I started getting migraines at the age of about 8 years old. And then in junior high, started having panic attacks, felt really anxious, stressed. I had the Bartonella stretch marks on my inner thigh, which made no sense because I was so thin. It made no sense that I would have any stretch marks. But we attributed it to, I'm tall, right? I'm 5'10". What is that? 168 centimeters? I don't know. I think
it's more like 170 something. I think
170. Okay. Yeah. So I grew quickly. That's what we thought maybe that was the reason behind it. No one was going to diagnose me at that time with Bartonella. And then in high school, I started having dizzy, fainting spells. I also just got really bloated out of nowhere. Like I was so thin, and it seemed like overnight I became really bloated, overweight. So they thought it was hypothyroidism, or that's what I was diagnosed with. And that went on for a while. I was diagnosed with POTS when I was 19. My brother died of cardiomegaly. And so I actually went to the cardiologist to see if I potentially had that, right, to rule it out. Thankfully, I do not. But in the process of seeing this cardiologist, who was quite ahead of his time, honestly, when I told him about the dizzy fainting spells, he's like, okay, we need to do a tilt wheel test to confirm POTS. I think that's what you have. So he diagnosed me with hypoglycemia, dysautonomia, and I tried beta blockers. They didn't work for me. I tried all sorts of things, but I began shifting my diet and trying to understand more about chronic illness. Of course, the community we have these days didn't exist then, as far as I knew. And then in college, I had all sorts of issues, and I was diagnosed with PCOS. I had chronic acne. I'd never had acne in my life, and that's what actually led to a celiac diagnosis. And going gluten-free solved so much. I have not had a panic attack since going gluten-free in 2012. I used to and I had panic disorder. So that put a lot of my symptoms at bay. And then, for POTS, I just would ensure that I consumed a ton of salt and electrolytes. But there were still symptoms that got in the way. I had a lot of joint issues. I had to later get shoulder surgery, and we didn't know what that was from. And I was in really rough jobs that were trying. I'm a medical social worker, so I was in a hospital. I was doing case management, and I wasn't practicing radical self-care for something that honestly requires radical self-care. And it essentially starts to eat away at you, and it's the politics, and it's so much more than that. Then got involved in humanitarian work for a while, was in Mexico after the earthquake, became pretty ill there, ended up in the hospital, had to cut my contract, returned back here, and I just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And over there, it was namely like GI issues, fatigue, and anyway, we discovered it was an infection, but even with clearing the infection, it just got worse and worse and worse. Came back here, I saw so many specialists, and no one could figure out what was wrong. So many specialists, and they just wanted to put me on steroids, which is fine temporarily, but that wasn't going to get to the root of what I was experiencing. Like, why am I experiencing so many symptoms? And finally went to Bastyr, which is a naturopath school. Someone recommended I go there. And then they were like, oh, this is complicated. We think you need to see this rheumatologist across the street. He's going to figure this out for you. But in the interim, I collected all these new autoimmune diagnoses, like lupus and mixed connective tissue disorder and so much more. And so I went across the street, made an appointment with this guy, and he took one look at me, and based on my presentation and the symptoms I listed for him, he was like, cat scratch fever. And my partner at the time, we looked at each other like, this guy is like, what is he talking about? That's a song. I don't know if you know the song, but I had never heard of, I had heard of Lyme peripherally. Other than that, I had absolutely no idea about Lyme disease or co-infections or anything. But I felt vindicated because for once someone gave me some answers. Like it wasn't all in my head. This wasn't psychosomatic. I finally could put a name to what I was experiencing. And that's when we started intense treatment, and that it got worse before it got better. The treatments were really hard, the herxing, and I ended up on my parents' couch as my mom as my caregiver. And that's what I did for a while just to heal. So
can I, that's, wow. The minute you said you started getting migraines when you were 8, I was just like, to deal with that at such a young age. And also, like, it just sounded like you've just had continual I know kids can't be that understanding. So when you've continually got all these problems, and as another kid, as you feel fine, you're just looking at that kid, just, oh, they're complaining again. You know, there's something wrong with them again. And I guess as a kid, that must have been really difficult. You know, a lack of understanding from other people, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, and I think just confusion, not understanding what it is, and going to doctors and them saying, actually everything's fine, kind of brushing it off.
Yeah.
And so, what else are my parents supposed to do? They're also not from this country. The English wasn't their first language. So they couldn't, we didn't have internet back then. So they couldn't deep dive into this for themselves. Like, between a lack of community and lack of resources, they just had to go off what the doctor was saying, which is, it'll pass. This is just something she's experiencing.
And did you, because you mentioned the numerous diagnoses, do you think, I'm almost like, now when I hear people list all the diagnoses, and even me when I talk through the different things, I almost feel like it's a confusing thing, because then you think you've just got all of these different things that you have to sort out one by one, rather than actually treat you as a whole person. Was that really confusing for you back in the day, when you just kept getting all of these things and you just felt, and overwhelming maybe, that you had all of these things to sort out?
Oh yeah, of course. I didn't know where they were coming from, how they were related to one another. Was this going to be the answer to all of my issues? And then you come across medications that aren't helpful. Why aren't they helping me? What options do I have? Do I have to live with this forever? Those are the questions and concerns that crop up.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Yeah. And it's that thought, isn't it? Am I going to live with this forever? That's the one that's like a very kind of daggers you in the heart a little bit when you think about something like that.
Yes, totally.
In terms of, I like to, whenever I'm asking these questions, just understand, and for my own mind, but also for everyone else, like the time frames involved here. So you said you were in college, and then how long was it between when you were in college to when you were like, essentially, you had this diagnosis, you had treatment, and you were like essentially housebound?
So from 2000, I got my celiac diagnosis in 2012. And so being gluten-free kept a lot of issues at bay. And then I went dairy-free in 2015, and that helped even more so. I had ongoing joint concerns. Like I said, I had shoulder surgery, and I think that was in 2016 or 17. So, these things were there. They were just simmering. I could continue to live my life with them. They weren't getting in the way to the point, like they weren't impacting my activities of daily living. It made it harder and challenging for sure, but not to the point I had to quit my job or anything like that. And then I like to say my body finally said no when I was in Mexico. That's when it, we can go into that, the mind-body connection, but my body was like, you're done. Like this, you have been going at 150% for too long. You've been ignoring me for too long. This is it. And that was 2018. So, I had quite a few years to listen to my body, to practice self-care. I didn't know what I know now. Right. And I wish I could go back in time and be like, and shake myself and be like, get out of this job, take care of yourself. I didn't know anything about detox. I mean, I knew some things about detoxing. Like I've been seeing holistic life practitioners since a pretty young age, but no one explained how to take their methods with me home. Because I just,
And so, I guess, could you take us through the next part of the story? So you were, the worst part of the story, I guess, when things got really bad.
So I didn't know that my apartment was riddled with mold. The doctors had actually mentioned it, and I told our landlord, we had told our landlord that my doctor had concerns. So they did the test and they said it was fine. And I trusted them. That was all during the time I was couch bound at my parents'. And anyway, so I'm couch bound. I'm doing various treatments. I am feeling pretty hopeless. I feel like I'm dying. I feel like a truck has run over me over and over and over again. And I'm just left to be just that, just a run over body. I remember I could barely comprehend what I was watching on TV. I had to leave my work. My relationship at the time naturally suffered for it. It felt, it didn't feel great to have to depend on my mom for everything, for showers, for all of it. So I felt awful and hopeless in every sense. And then not to mention my sensitivities. I was down to like 20 ingredients I could safely eat because I have mast cell activation syndrome. And I couldn't be around any scents. And if anyone wanted to visit, I'd have to tell them to wash their clothing in like free and clear detergent. So I wouldn't react. They couldn't wear perfume, colognes, anything around me. I felt almost like bubble girl, it was terrible. And so I also at the same time wasn't going to like resign to this. I knew there was something more. Like I'm in treatment. There has to be hope. So I started looking for hope. I looked for stories of people who had healed from these various things. And yes, there is no quote unquote cure, but you can heal. And that's what I needed to hear that. And a friend of mine had told me about the Walls protocol, Dr. Terry Walls, and how she healed herself. I think you're familiar maybe with her. So from MS, which is incredible. And so I read her book, and one of the things she had recommended, she's like, do not do this protocol without journaling first. So I'd never really journaled. Wasn't my thing exactly, but I knew if she mentioned it was important. So then I delved into journaling and how helpful it is for the body and the mind, and how people's wounds, they've done studies like people's wounds will heal quicker with journaling. So you think journaling and, mental health, psychologically it's helpful, this or that, but you start learning about the mind-body connection and how it really affects you as a whole. So I began journaling. I tried looking for a mind-body journal. It didn't exist. I didn't want to create it. I was tired. I was sick. I could barely understand what was being said on television. And here I am, creating prompts for myself. And I just wanted to create a journal with prompts so I could use it. And then I realized, oh gosh, this would be helpful for so many people. So anyway, as I started to use the journal, I was able to understand how foods were affecting me, because I have prompts for pretty much everything, where my blood sugar levels are, where my bowel movements were, how I was feeling in terms of my mental health. And then I did some research on gratitude as well as self-love and how that plays a part in healing. There was one woman, and I didn't find the story. She was really, really sick. And she actually started sitting in front of the mirror and telling each body part how much she loved it. And even though it was so hard for her, and she actually was able to heal from what she had. And I was so inspired by that, because I had gotten to a point where I really didn't trust my body. I didn't love my body. I was scared of my body. I thought it was betraying me. I thought it was attacking me. And self-love has just been such a journey for me in chronic illness. So with the journal, I was able to then connect dots in my health, as well as see how far I had come. Because when I was just couch bound without journaling, every day seemed the same. It felt like Groundhog's Day, except the sick chronic illness version. And being able to look back and say wow, I was only able to stand for this long a month ago. And now I can walk around the house without issue. That was huge for me. So, yeah, I returned. Eventually I got better and better and better, with various modalities, supplements, treatments. I returned back to our apartment thinking, it was safe. And I was better, obviously, but I noticed that I was backtracking, and like it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm likely gonna have to return maybe back to my parents' house again. And that's when two things happened. I decided to do DNRS, neural retraining.
Yeah. I've had a lot of people talk about that. Yeah.
Changed my life.
Really?
And then I decided to retest the apartment, and it had enormous amounts of mold. And we just said, we need to get out of here. And it's making a very long story short, because that was such a stressful time in my life. I eventually came out here to Joshua Tree, where there's effectively no mold. It's so dry, and it's been one of the best things I could have done for myself. So that, with DNRS and all the other things I do, saved my life.
Wow. And so I know, and I said, and this is what I've read up, and like you're still kind of, there's still things that you want to improve upon. You're not there where you want to be. However, you're choosing a life to live. You're about to go. You've still been traveling and doing and being active. Where would you say you're at in compared to like where you want to be, or where you were, or do you not think about it like that?
It's so funny, because there's days where I feel better than I have even before. I'm going to say before 2018, right, when I got really sick, and it blows my mind, because I didn't think I could get there. Like, I just have days where I'm pain free. I think clearly. I have energy. I'm not fatigued. And then there are days where, healing isn't linear. So there's just days where I'm like, oh gosh, like, am I going backwards? And then I instead say, like, I'm just moving to the side, and I like to take, I like to observe what's going on. And usually I can figure out, I'm just moving to the side and pivoting a little bit. And like, for example, I had a few days of fatigue last week, but I also realized I started, a couple new mineral supplements, one being magnesium, and a friend who's a health coach explained to me that can actually cause a detox-like reaction. Minerals can. I had no idea. So go figure, like that just made me feel better. Like usually, I'm starting to realize sometimes there is a true explanation. Sometimes maybe there's not, or we can't figure it out. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have a ways to go, and this is my new lifestyle, like my lifestyle of supplements, of constantly detoxing, of my radical self-care regimen that I have. Like this is my life. I'm not my diet, the way I eat.
No, I mean, me too. I'm still kind of figuring it all out. I mean, my goal is though to be at some point in the future where it doesn't have to be, I'm choosing to do it because I want an extra level of health, rather than I don't want to feel really bad, if that makes sense. I just want to talk a bit about DNRS, because I think anyone who's listening to this show thinks that I'm specifically going out there and just targeting people who do brain retraining, but it just seems that so many people who are recovering, at least it's either the main thing that got them better, or it's at least one of the things. And so at which point did you start doing that? Was that one of the biggest things for you? How long did it take to make a difference? Are you still doing it?
Yeah, so October, it would be 2 years since I did DNRS. And within 6 months of doing it, I noticed a shift within days. So I went from 20 foods 20 safe foods, to pretty much being able to eat anything. Granted, like my diet, it's like gluten-free, plant-based, organic. So that I can be around since, it's been amazing. Do I do the exact practice? No, I've kind of created my own neural retraining program that I have set forth for myself that makes sense for my lifestyle.
Yeah.
And when I work with clients, it's the same. Like I tell all of my clients, and I'm just about to go, I borrowed DNRS. I never paid for it. A friend let me borrow, and I'm just about to buy it so I can send it to clients so they don't have to worry about buying it. I don't know. They've each purchased it so far. And I see such a dramatic shift for them, because healing, it's really important. And I didn't mention this, like there's, I see healing as a pie, and each piece is as integral as the other, right? And I haven't talked about each piece, but one of those is trauma. It's really getting into the root cause. Why do you have nervous system dysfunction? Why is your limbic system on overdrive? When did that happen? Let's get to it. But for me to get into trauma with clients, I need them to be at a baseline where they feel safe, because what happens is they're in chronic fight or flight mode. I've yet to meet anyone with chronic illness who isn't in chronic fight or flight mode. And people think chronic fight or flight mode, like fighting off something, running away from it. But there's 4 F's. There's also freezing and there's fawning. And that's what almost every person with chronic illness I know does. They fawn, which is people please, codependency. Essentially putting other things and people before themselves. That's what fawning is.
Yeah.
And why are we doing that? Because something in childhood or our teenage years told us that's what we needed to do to survive. And thankfully it did. It helped you survive, but it's not serving you well now. And so that's what we work on. After.
I think that's a really interesting point, actually, because like I know a lot of like people pleasers who will really they'll do things where it's completely at the detriment to themselves. And when I look at what they're doing, and this isn't like I'm a selfish person and I won't do things for other people, but I guess I look at that and I don't really do that. However, what I do is I put work ahead of myself a lot, and I still do it now, and it's still a really difficult thing for me to do. This morning, as an example, I'm working with this guy who's trying to get my joints up to a point where I can start getting back to doing some decent amount of exercise. And what he's given me is about an hour and a half every day, which is like a crazy amount of time. And so I'm doing it this morning, and I can see myself cutting corners because I want to start work. I want to start doing stuff. And I'm anxious. And then I'm like, no, this is not what it's about. If anything, you don't work today. And if the only thing you do today is that thing for your health, that's the most important thing. And is that what you say to people? Above anything, your health has to go first, then you can look at other things. Yeah.
Health is first. You're the most important thing in your life. And the moment you prioritize something else, it's telling your body you're not. And that's stressful. That puts us in a chronic stress response.
Yeah.
I mention this like on my Instagrams and with my clients all the time. Our bodies are always going to prioritize survival over healing. And survival is that chronic stress response. Yeah. And even I am still working on it, right? It's getting off this hamster wheel. Like we constantly have to check in with ourselves to say like, okay, I'm not perfect at it. I'm a recovering codependent people pleaser, fawner. Yeah. And it's just, something we constantly work on and take care of.
Yeah, that resonates so much. I do think about it, but I guess I don't think about it like that. And when I ever hear people pleasing, I just think I'm making myself sound bad at the moment. That it's more than I'm just putting. I will always try to put. I guess it's more like achieving and stuff like that. And I think a lot of that is because chronic illness holds you back in life, and you're missing out on maybe things that other people are doing. I think it's that desperation to like keep your life moving forward. So you'll therefore keep working on other things that are still detrimental to your health, if that makes sense.
Totally. And also we get into this habit of thinking stress equals productivity. Like if I'm doing things, I'm productive. Because what happens with chronic illness is our bodies finally say no. And it stresses us out because we're like, wait, I'm not doing 100 things like I was before, you know? Yeah. And so we find ways almost to get ourselves back on that hamster wheel. It's very cyclical. And it requires work. You have to be so consistent about it. Yeah.
Do you, I'm really interested that you went to Joshua Tree, and that's, so, because I actually thought, because I looked at, I love Southern California. I've never really, is Joshua Tree Northern California? Is that?
No, it's Southern California. It's just east. Yeah.
Because I love the thought of living in Southern California, but I actually checked out like the mold and it says that there is quite a lot of mold in Southern California. But is that because a lot of the buildings are built quite badly, and because there's no rain there, so I wouldn't have thought that
yeah, it's dry, but the coastal towns are coastal towns. They get marine layers. So I was in San Diego. That's where I was in an apartment with lots of mold, but there was water damage so that was a whole other issue. Like that could technically happen here, right? If I had water damage in this home and I didn't take care of it, that could lead to mold, even though it's so dry. But it's not just gonna grow here pretty much out of nowhere, because the levels are so dry. We're not close to the ocean. We're east. We're about 2 hours away from Los Angeles, 2.5 from San Diego and Orange County.
Okay. Do you see yourself living there for the foreseeable, for a good amount of time?
I see myself living here at the very least, until I have cleared out mycotoxins from my body. That's not going to keep me from traveling and exploring other places, because I don't know how long that's going to take, right? If and when I do clear it out, I do believe there will be a day where I'm completely clear of most things. I'm sort of I'm a wanderlust. I like to explore and live in other places. So I'm not sure. Maybe I could see this being a home base and somewhere where I go back and forth to and from. But definitely, I feel amazing being here. Like the air quality is great. Nature is so healing. The fact that I walk outside and I can ground right away while looking at mountains and a Joshua Tree on my property is pretty magical.
No, that does. That was purely a selfish question out of interest. So I guess in terms of what you feel were the main tools to get you, and you don't need to give loads of detail on this, but detoxing, brain retraining, and like supplements and stuff like that, or
supplements, holistic dentistry. I had no idea about cavitations. I have officially cleared everything for my mouth from previous wisdom teeth extractions. I had no idea about that and how that affects the body. I noticed a difference in my health the moment I took care of that. I did like the Perrin technique with an osteopath. That was really helpful. Perrin technique. It's kind of like craniosacral.
Calming the nervous system down.
Exactly. Especially that vagus nerve. I think therapy is huge. Me, like working on my previous traumas, that's, if we don't take care of our mental health and our previous traumas, like we store issues in our tissues. We need to let go of them. Also, I am very pro psychedelics, and I'm actually an integration therapist for psychedelics, and I've seen those shift so many people's lives.
We might need to extend this podcast by another few minutes. I did a podcast on. I went to do ayahuasca in Mexico. And yeah, it was, I'd never really done much psychedelics before. So typically I went and then did it for 2 weeks, and also peyote and bufo as well. It was a transformative experience, and something that I know a lot of people who've done psychedelics, but they've tend to do it at a festival, or it's been very recreational, and this was very like ceremonial, and there was a lot of after the next day there was a lot of integration, a lot of learning, and a lot of sharing, and it's something I want to try and build into, for now anyway, build into like a yearly thing that I can go and do. I also like the thought of doing like microdosing and stuff like that. Do you do microdosing? Is that something you do?
I do. I microdose psilocybin mushrooms.
Okay, cool.
So that has been just great, because there are studies showing how much it helps with chronic illness, with clearing out viruses and so much more. Yeah, so I'm very pro that. If you're open to it, I highly recommend anyone watching Fantastic Fungi, the documentary on Netflix. Highly recommend it, because it goes into how magical mushrooms are as a whole, not just psilocybin, but then they do talk about psilocybin a little bit. So yeah, therapy. I mean, there's just nutrition, like eating a nutrient dense body, remothering myself. Oh my gosh, like that's been so amazing. I like I said earlier, I ignored my body for years and years and years. And if my body was my child, like I would have had a child protective services called on me, like in the sense of like how much I neglected my overall care. So just changing the perspective of how I view myself, my life, my body has been incredibly transformative. So yeah, that's awesome. so many different things have been helpful. They've all been, those pieces of pie.
Well, as you say, it's a lifestyle. For those anyone who can't see, you've got a very cute dog that's just walking around in the background.
Thank you. That's Cowboy.
He was on his back earlier, and I was having a little look. What was I going to say? Just in terms of, I guess, going back into the story, for people who are listening to this, who are going through like the darkest of times right now, and who can't see a way out and can't believe in their own recovery, how important for you was like believing you could get you through it?
I could get teary thinking about this. It is everything. Yeah. Believing you can heal is everything, because if you do not have that belief or that hope, it's like everything, is bound to fail you. And I know this from experience, from myself, from clients. It is so important. And, with that said, like, be mindful of the words and the things you're taking in. Like, I was in Facebook groups that were really negative. It was just like this race for who has it worse and how much worse it's going to get. And I quickly realized, but it took me a minute, but I realized, wow, I'm leaving this feeling worse than I felt when I entered it. Cause I'm going into this hoping for community, hoping for guidance, and I'm leaving feeling worse. So that's how I gauge everything. Like when I enter into anything, be it a relationship, a project, a job, anything, like if I don't leave feeling more excited than I was, then what's the point? What's the point? And, the biggest thing I always tell my clients is we want to avoid dis-ease. That's everything. We want to avoid it, and we want to focus on joy. And I facilitate a free chronic illness group. And it was last week. We host it once a month, and we created joy menus for ourselves. So especially on days when you feel crappy and a bit hopeless, like that's when you go to your joy menu and you start to hit up whatever feels right on it, be it watching a silly movie, painting, drawing, etc.
Yeah, I love that. Although I might start hitting on that joy menu a little bit too much. There'd have to be a limit for me where
No such thing. No such thing.
No, I love that. I think it's such an important thing. For some, I I think I think also, I don't know your thoughts on this, for someone who's listened to this, who's like, I guess I'm speaking about myself as well, like someone who believes that they're going to recover, but there is still that trauma that you've just mentioned, that maybe, I mean, you must have had, when I was thinking about when you were talking through it, you know, from such a young age, there must have been a part of you that was thinking, oh, you know, I've had these things for going on for so long, you know, there's something wrong with me, and that added to your like disbelief about your recovery. Did you feel like, did you see that as trauma as well?
I mean, medical trauma is real, right?
Yeah.
It is so real. Of course, I mean, it didn't help, but I also see it from the lens of, I didn't know then what I know now, right?
Yeah.
So that's, that shifts things a little bit.
Yeah.
I kept myself so busy that I didn't pay enough attention to what was going on, again, which is part of the issue.
Yeah.
That I was just always too busy to pay attention to myself, to my body, and it's screaming at me, or what it was telling me.
What are the ways now in your life, where, if you look, I guess if you could have had a completely different life where maybe you were, you didn't get any symptoms, but you carried on maybe down a path, you had those few other jobs that were maybe not right for you, if you'd have carried on going with those, versus now, like the situation you're in now, you know a lot more, you're living in a completely different place. How is your life better as a result, do you think?
Oh, I say, like, it took me getting sick to get healthy. And part of the reason I got sick was because I of my lifestyle before. So, people say like, oh, I just want to go back to how my life was. I don't say that. I don't say that. Like, yes, I miss the things I was able to do without really much thought, like, especially like, I'm just going to take this, this 20-hour flight with without thinking about what food I'm bringing or supplements or this or like that part. Yeah, I do miss, but my overall lifestyle, I do not. I am like, I now prioritize myself, my well-being, my self-care, my self-love. I have a newfound respect for my life, for myself. That didn't exist before. Like, I think back and it's really sad. It's like, I didn't think I was worthy of being healthy. I mean, that was at the root. And it took me doing some EMDR, which is, I'm an EMDR therapist, but it took me as a client doing EMDR to really get to these negative belief patterns that so much of this was rooted in. And I have a newfound perspective and love for myself and for life now. And I couldn't be more grateful for that.
Love that. It took me getting sick to get healthy. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. Great
Yes.
quote. I'm going to steal that. I'm probably going to use it as my own one day.
Okay. You're there already.
Yeah. No, I think it's just it's a great quote. I used a quote the other day that someone else said on a podcast, and I couldn't remember who it was, so I just passed it off as my own. And I apologize to anyone who caught that. Finally, just someone, I guess anyone who's listening to this right now, who is in the depths of chronic illness, what would be your advice to them, in order just for them to keep going, not specifically what to do, but like mentally what to do?
I think remembering that you can heal. I want you to keep that in mind. And maybe it seems like complete BS when you're flaring, or when you just, it's hard to see a light at the end of the tunnel, but there is a light. Listen to the stories. I mean, you have people on here. It's why it's the chronic comeback. You have so many people on here who have been able to heal. And And we are constantly going to be healing. I don't imagine a day where I'm like, I'm 100% healed. Like this is my new lifestyle of taking care of myself, and I'm fine with that. I love it. And I think it's just something to remember, like, you can get here.
Love that. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And yeah, I'm excited to see what the next level of health brings you. What if someone wants to connect with you, maybe ask any specific questions about today's stuff you brought up on today's show? Is that okay for them to do that? And if so,
of course,
do that.
Yeah. So I have two Instagrams. So one is Begin Within Today, and that's my therapy practice. That's where I sell the chronic illness daily healing journals. Mm-hmm. And then I also am at Buen Camino, and that's BUENQAMINO. And that's more my health conscious food, travel, and lifestyle blog. I talk about a little bit of everything. So, you'll see more of my healing journey on there. And yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has. That's what we're here for as a community, to help inspire and take care of one another.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. It's been amazing. And I know everyone will get so much from listening to that. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on here, and thank you for having such a lovely podcast.